Hey, welcome to part two of Knockout Queens of the Hardy Wrestling Podcast. Thank you for listening to this second part of my new episode. And I thank you for listening to the first part of it if you've listened to the interview I had with Miranda Morales. So in this episode, I'm going to recap Raw that takes place on Mondays, NXT and AEW, which takes place on Wednesdays, and for the first time, I'm going to review Impact Wrestling, which takes place on Tuesdays on Access TV, and I'm going to go over a little bit of SmackDown that I actually saw Friday night, but couldn't really see all of the show due to a professional obligation that I had. So, I hope you enjoy the recaps that I would have normally put on a regular episode on here, and we'll just start with Monday Night Raw. Okay, so now we're going to get into the weekly recap, and we're going to recap Monday Night Raw. So the show started with a 10-bell salute and a tribute to Pat Patterson, whom we lost last Wednesday. So that's how it started. We continue to keep his friends and family in our thoughts and prayers and send them good vibes at the loss of their incredibly iconic person and wrestling icon. So now we're going to discuss the women. And the first women's match on the card was Asuka versus Shayna Baszler. And Lana and Nia Jax were in both of their corners. So backstage, Nia and Shayna were both snarling, of course, because they're angry at the idea that they could get beat by Lana, and Lana's even, remotely there. So they were talking about all the ways in which Shayna was going to destroy Asuka and all of the above, and then how afterward they were going to destroy and annihilate Lana and mutilate her to the point to where that she was unrecognizable, and they would ruin her face. And then they were talking about how they're gonna have different body parts all over the place and everything. And then Nia was like, her boobs are gonna be on her back. And I thought that was funny, because I'm just like, I'm supposed to believe you guys, as this heel tag team who hate everybody and everything. And then once you guys talk about mutilating Lana, you say something like her boobs are going to be on her back. And I was just like, oh my God, how is anybody in Gorilla not laughing right now? Like out loud. But either way, it was funny. So this match was actually pretty good, because I enjoy seeing the both of them fight, because I think something that's being lost in the midst of this Lana feud of them trying so hard to focus on Lana being nothing is the fact that Shayna Baszler is still a very technically gifted MMA wrestler. I feel like that Nia and Shayna aren't being booked as strongly as they could be, simply because they're not leaning into their strengths a whole lot more, because they're doing a whole lot of more character work with the whole bully versus Lana being the hero and the girl who's being bullied who's trying to rise above, and with Asuka, her friend, who's trying to take up for her and everything. I feel like what's being lost here is the fact that you have these two strong women who have physical dominance in the form of Nia Jax, and then you have physical dominance in Shayna Baszler, and the fact that she knows how to bend body parts and break body parts, so much so to the point of torture. And they're not leaning into that a whole lot further. But you saw a little bit of that in this match here with Asuka and Shayna Baszler. So Shayna was targeting Asuka's left arm a whole lot and gave lots of damage there. And then Nia, outside of the ring, was going after Lana, and running after her and stuff like that. And then she got sent hard into the announce table with a head scissors takedown from Lana, which I thought was really impressive. And capitalizing on this distraction, Asuka rolled up Baszler for the win here. But then later in the night, Asuka was giving a pep talk to Lana and saying, that she could face Nia Jax next week in a match and beat her, right? So as, Lana was terrified and scared of it, but Asuka was trying to encourage her or whatever. After Asuka left, Lana was saying, I can beat Nia Jax. I can beat Nia Jax. I can beat Nia Jax. And then Nia Jax shows up behind her and then scares her to death and then walks away. And it's pretty clear that this is going to continue to go on, but I do feel some type of way about it in the sense that I want Lana to, of course, one-up Nia Jax once and for all, but I'm sort of ready for this feud to end. So we'll see what happens from there. And then, of course, they're still beefing them up because they're going to face each other at TLC for the women's tag team titles, I believe. So this is going to be an interesting dynamic here, but I'm sort of ready for this storyline to end. Then also with the women, we had a mixed tag match between Ricochet and Dana Brooke versus Slapjack and Reckoning from Retribution with Mustafa Ali at ringside. So Matt Riddle, there was a segment backstage where Matt Riddle was asking Dana Brooke and Ricochet where her business was, but they were so focused on their match that they couldn't, help him out. And he was offering them bro nuts, which I thought was really funny because he's really trying to start this whole business thing to impress the Hurt Business with, but he's beefing with them at the same time, and I think it's funny. So then in an interview, Ricochet and Dana Brooke talked about what it would mean to beat Retribution and stuff like that. So Mustafa then promised Ricochet and Dana Brooke that they were failures and they need to be taken down by them. So Reckoning, aka Mia Yim, planted Dana Brooke with an aggressive offense, but then Slapjack and Ricochet distracted her, allowing Brooke to connect with a sit-out slam for a 3 count. So in a very quick manner, Ricochet and Dana Brooke beat them, and Mustafa basically berated Slapjack and Reckoning for losing their match. And I'm wondering, how long is he going to just keep yelling at them before they snap on him and just be like, I don't have to take this anymore? Because it feels like it feels like Retribution just isn't the strong force that they used to be, that they were booked to be, a couple months ago. Because it felt like they had all the gas behind them with Mustafa being revealed as their leader. But it doesn't help that they keep losing matches over and over again. And I'm wondering if there's supposed to be some type of payoff with them leaving, or if there's going to be a payoff with them looking stronger and just attacking everyone like they used to do, or what. I'm just wondering what is going on with Retribution at this stage, and what will they seek to, bring forth with this story. So I really just don't know with that. So really that's all that happened with the women on Raw. Now, to go towards the men, the show started with Randy Orton calling out Bray Wyatt for a match ahead of, the fight with The Fiend. So Randy Orton explained why he's not afraid of The Fiend, and he promised to stare Bray Wyatt in the eyes and show him, why Randy Orton is actually, really the evil one. And he demanded to be let in. So Bray Wyatt arrived from the Firefly Funhouse without Alexa Bliss because he said that Alexa was kind of shook up from how mean Randy treated her last week. So Bray Wyatt ran a game show questioning the horrors The Fiend would inflict on Randy Orton. And then Orton interrupted him by demanding a match with the Bray Wyatt persona of him, and then Bray Wyatt accepted. So later on, they will go on to fight, and then I'll talk about that a little bit later. So then Sheamus and Drew McIntyre ruined Miz TV, which was featuring AJ Styles. So before this, Keith Lee confronted Sheamus backstage and told him that he feels like he's acting like he's Drew McIntyre's best friend, only to stab him in the back so he can get a chance at the WWE Championship. And Keith really wasn't seeing, Keith was basically seeing through the BS that he felt like Sheamus was, putting forth here, but Sheamus was trying to prove him wrong and all that. So he said, whatever. Then AJ Styles, was on Miz TV, and then they decided to focus on Sheamus and Drew McIntyre, and basically just made fun of them with Irish and Scottish accents, which were kind of terrible, but what can you expect? And then Sheamus came out, and then Drew McIntyre came out, and they were not amused by anything that they were saying. Then Drew McIntyre went off on The Miz and Morrison, while AJ Styles escaped outside to stand with his bodyguard Omos. Then Sheamus and Drew cleared the ring and beat up on Miz and Morrison, and then AJ Styles basically left them to take the beating. And then as The Miz and John Morrison were running away after getting beat up, The Miz had realized he left his Money in the Bank contract, and then Drew took the Money in the Bank contract and threw it across the Titantron, and it hit one of the LED boards. And when he threw it, I mean, like, he chucked it like a football player would throw a football, like, to the other player to hit, like, a touchdown or something. Like, it was crazy. Like, I don't know the technical terms of football. Forgive me, that's not my sport. But he literally threw the ball. Like, well, not the ball. He threw the case, and it was just like, whoa. Like, Drew really could have played football in a whole nother life by the way he chucked it. I was just like, that is impressive. He's such an athlete. Then we had a match between Kofi Kingston and Shelton Benjamin, and then, which also led to another match between Kofi Kingston and Cedric Alexander. So this beef between the Hurt Business and the New Day has just been heating up, over the past couple of weeks. And of course, to me, you can never go wrong with these guys wrestling in a match against each other because, I mean, it's black excellence, number one. And number two, seeing Shelton Benjamin fight Kofi Kingston felt a lot like the good old days, towards the early 2010s where they would fight each other. So Shelton seemed to sort of tweak the left knee of Kofi Kingston early because he lifted him up, and then Kofi was trying to land on his feet, but then as he landed on his feet, he sort of landed awkwardly on his left knee. But then Kofi knocked him down outside of the ring and then caught him with a Trouble in Paradise for the win. So after he won the match and Xavier and Kofi were celebrating, Cedric got in the ring and got all spicy with Kofi and said that, and he demanded that he face him, and then Kofi did accept. But something that was interesting was the fact that Xavier was like, no, he won the match. Why are you doing this? Blah, blah, blah. But then Cedric was just being all strong and stuff, saying, oh, no, you better get back in this ring and face me and da-da-da-da-da. And let me tell you something. Cedric Alexander turning heel is the best thing to ever happen to him. Because he's believing in himself a whole lot more. He's speaking up a whole lot more. And it's just really great to see him come into his, I'm sort of smelling myself vibe. Like, I dig it, but it's irritating me because I love the New Day. But I dig it though, because this confidence is just really cool. So Kofi accepted the challenge, and Xavier watched it ringside as Cedric, went aggressively after the knee of Kofi, which is a classic move. You go after the injured body part. And then he hit a drop kick to the knee and then hit a spinning brain buster. And then MVP was outside of the ring, yelling orders at Cedric. So, as his overconfidence sort of got the best of him as Kofi tried to, build his momentum back. And then as they both teetered on the top rope, Kofi fell badly on his knee. And then Cedric planted Kofi with the lumbar check for the win. So I feel like it's amazing that Cedric Alexander, an up-and-coming star, got a win over someone who could be considered a veteran in this business in Kofi Kingston. So I'm just wondering if this is really going to lead to a Raw tag team match between the New Day and Shelton and Cedric, or what, because it's like they're able to beat them, in singles competition, but they have yet to really beat them in tag team action. So we'll see what happens with that. But seeing these guys fight each other was just absolutely great. Cedric's a star, so I'm really excited for him. Then we had a match between Drew McIntyre and Sheamus versus AJ Styles, The Miz, and John Morrison. So this was sort of like a handicap situation. So it seemed like Drew McIntyre and Sheamus were having a little bit of a struggle getting on the same page during this match. So they decided to brutalize John Morrison and they threw him over the announce table. And then AJ Styles refused to get involved with Drew McIntyre, so The Miz took a beating as John Morrison tried to recover outside of the ring. And then The Miz and John Morrison got the advantage over Drew McIntyre as they isolated him in the corner to keep him from tagging in his partner. And then AJ Styles saw his opening to get involved. And then Sheamus tried to give McIntyre a reprieve, but he was also isolated and beat down. And then AJ Styles gladly went after Sheamus until he got planted with a white noise kick. Then Drew McIntyre got a hot tag and then teased a Claymore on John Morrison, but then The Miz saved him from getting kicked. Then Sheamus hit McIntyre with a bro kick, setting up AJ Styles to hit the phenomenal forearm on Sheamus for the win. And this was kind of crazy because after this match happened, Drew and Sheamus were sort of staring at each other because they were angry at each other, for losing the match and for that miscommunication that they had with that bro kick to Drew. And then Charlie backstage was asking Sheamus, about the kick, and he made it clear that it wasn't intentional, that he didn't intend on kicking him. But then Drew got in his face, and then they both pushed each other and started fighting backstage as the locker room cheered on, and Drew Gulak was standing in the back with a phone out recording it, which I thought was really funny. And then, because he was all world star, and then Pat Buck tried to break them up. Y'all remember Pat from when he got in Nia Jax's face and then suspended her earlier in the year. And then they decided to beat him up, and then they went off to buy a beer. It was kind of like those two best friends who get to fighting with each other, and then they realize they love each other midway, and then they make up. I think one of my exes told me that's how friends fight in terms of boy and manhood, but I'm just like, that's weird. But either way, it seems like they're on a good foot, but at the same time, I'm still sort of looking at Sheamus with a little bit of a side eye like Keith Lee was earlier. So, we'll see. Then we had a match between Bobby Lashley with MVP, of course, because hurt business, versus Jeff Hardy, Hardy Gang. So, Matt Riddle caught Jeff Hardy backstage before his match to ask him about teaming together as a tag team and calling each other the Hardy Bros. And I thought this was so sweet because I'm just sort of like, you're technically not a Hardy brother, but if you really want to be in a tag team with Jeff, then I guess we'll invite you to the cookout, to the Hardy cookout anyway. So Jeff was interested, but he was kind of busy, so he couldn't really say yes or no to his question. So MVP reminded Bobby Lashley to go after Hardy's bad back and his bad knee. And it worked out for a moment until Jeff Hardy showed his instincts, with a series of impressive reversals, which shows that Jeff Hardy still got it, even though people do be calling him old or whatever online, but whatever. Then MVP got involved, but then Matt Riddle ran down to even the odds. So, like I said, I think it's funny how Matt Riddle is trying to impress the Hurt Business from a business standpoint, but he's still beefing with them. Then Bobby Lashley punished the charismatic Enigma, and then leaving him barely able to stand. And then Jeff blocked the Hurt Lock, but then Bobby transitioned into a sleeper. But then Jeff Hardy fought back up and then hit a Whisper in the Wind. And then he's hit a Twist of Fate, which set up a Swanton Bomb. But then Bobby Lashley dodged it and then hit a spear followed by the Hurt Lock. And he refused to let go even after Jeff Hardy tapped out. But then Matt Riddle saved him, from that after the match beating. So it looks like we're going to get another alliance between Matt Riddle and Jeff Hardy here. And I'm pretty, stoked about it because the both of them together, it's just like you have the veteran and the OG with the charismatic new dude in Matt Riddle. So, hey, I figure it's a pretty good tag team to make at this point because Jeff Hardy doesn't have his real life brother anymore because he's on AEW. So, why not? But I'm wondering if Bobby Lashley is going to get, in a tag team with MVP, or if he's just going to continue to fight the both of them, or just fight Matt Riddle later on for the United States title. Who knows? So then we had the main event between Randy Orton and Bray Wyatt. And I say Bray Wyatt, the host, and not the Fiend here. So Bray Wyatt laughed as he saw Randy Orton stomp around the ring, and he entered, with his entrance, and he was all, smiling or whatever, like the twisted Mr. Rogers that he is. And then he kept that smile as he slammed Randy Orton onto the announce table with a back body drop, and then he ran off commentary, ready to do more damage. And then he actually picked up a headset from one of the commentators. I believe it was either Byron Saxton or Tom Phillips, and he said, "We'll be right back." And then Randy Orton turned the momentum around after the commercial break, punishing Bray Wyatt, but yet the Firefly Funhouse host still showed that he was able to keep up with Randy Orton here during the match, and he almost enjoyed the pain as he was smiling through it. And then it fueled his comeback as he planted Randy Orton with a running crossbody and a DDT. Then Randy Orton blocked the Sister Abigail and thumped Bray Wyatt in the eye, followed by the draping DDT. Then the lights went out. just as Randy Orton hit an RKO. And then the Fiend laid right next to the Viper as the lights came back on, and then he choked out Randy Orton with a mandible claw to end the night. And I thought it was a really smooth transition how Bray Wyatt was laying there, and then all of a sudden the lights go out, and then boom, there's the Fiend, and then he chokes Randy Orton out. So it's looking like the mind games between Randy Orton and the Fiend are just not going to end, which is beefing up their eventual blow up at TLC, which I am excited about. But something that I have noticed in the TLC build up is that a lot of matches really don't have any tables, ladders, and chairs in them. Like, they've maybe announced maybe 1 or 2 matches that will actually have either of those objects in them. The rest of them are just regular, and I feel like that's kind of lame, but they still have time to book it, so it's whatever. So that's the recap of Raw. Now we're going to recap NXT with a little bit of AEW. Okay, so I was sitting with my friends one day and they asked me, Stephanie, how do you record your podcast? And I said, with the Anchor app on my phone. And they were like, are you serious? I'm like, yeah, it's that simple. It is absolutely free. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone and your computer. And it will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and many more. You can also make money from the podcast with no minimum listenership. And it's got everything you need to make a podcast in one place. They even have classes and stuff that you can listen to that will give you all kinds of good tips on what you need to do in order to make the best podcast. So if you want to do this, download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. That's anchor.fm, or download the free Anchor app to get started. All right, so now we're going to recap NXT with a little bit of AEW thrown in there. So the women's action that sort of happened on NXT was a match between Raquel Gonzalez and a little bit of a celebration of the Garganos and Candice LeRae talking about their wins and victories at War Games this past weekend. So basically, they came out, with smiles on their faces, flanked by Austin Theory and Indy Hartwell, who proved to be the X factors in their matches at TakeOver War Games. Johnny Gargano won back his NXT North American title from Leon Ruff and Damian Priest. And Austin Theory was a part of the Ghostface gang who actually helped him do it. Then you had Team Candice LeRae, who won their women's War Games match against Team Shotzi. And Raquel Gonzalez was the one who actually made the pin for the team as she pinned the NXT Women's Champion Io Shirai. So they were out there celebrating, and Indy Hartwell helped in that match as well. So she had her left arm in a cast because she broke her arm during the match. And Johnny gave Candice LeRae a trophy for her War Games victory and actually had like a doll head with green hair to symbolize Shotzi and make fun of her, and said that he and Austin Theory would defeat Damian Priest and Leon Ruff in a tag team match next week. So then after that point, Damian Priest came back out after having previously appeared before earlier in the night, and he got attacked by Karrion Kross, but more on that later. So basically, in the main event, you had a female match between Raquel Gonzalez and Ember Moon. Ember Moon, being sort of like the NXT OG here, was trying to get revenge on behalf of Team Shotzi. And Raquel Gonzalez is riding high her momentum from War Games after I said before she pinned Io Shirai to win the War Games match. So she did damage to Ember Moon relatively early by choking her out and throwing her around the ring. And every time Ember Moon tried to rally, she was always planted on the mat by the sheer power of Raquel Gonzalez here. Finally, Ember Moon connected with a suplex and a cartwheel clothesline followed by a DDT that barely got a 2 count, but it actually did affect Raquel. Then Ember Moon climbed the stage, but then Raquel caught her and blasted her head first into the steel post. Then Ember held on basically throughout all the pain she was going through, and she held on and tried to fight through it. Then Raquel caught the Eclipse, which was a shocker here because you've never really seen anybody catch Ember Moon while she's about to do her eclipse, then planted her with a clothesline and then hit a single arm power bomb for the win. Then after the match, Toni Storm tried to attack Ember Moon with Raquel's help, but then Rhea Ripley came out there and made the save, and then Rhea Ripley and Raquel stared each other down to end the show. I feel like now Raquel is becoming Rhea Ripley's one true person because they're both really big Amazon women who like to fight each other. And I just love that every time they see each other, they just want to get to fighting. It's almost like Peter Griffin and the chicken from Family Guy, if you know that reference. Like every time they saw each other, it was on sight and they were going to beat each other's behind. That's just what I feel like every time I see Rhea Ripley and Raquel Gonzalez go up against each other or stare at each other or whatever to prove which one is the most dominant. And I just love seeing them fight. And that's really all that happened with the women. So we're going to press forward with the men. Finn Balor, came out to talk about, what was next for him. And he basically said that War Games is now over and now it's time to see who's going to step up to the plate to face him. So Pete Dunne came out, and he, wanted to face him, and stuff because they were cut from the same cloth or whatever. But then Kyle O'Reilly interrupted and said that he wasn't going to stand for Pete Dunne going for the title after losing at War Games because O'Reilly's team, the Undisputed Era, actually won the match against Team Pat or whatever it is they were calling themselves. Kyle O'Reilly, tried to goad Finn Balor into a rematch because he was the last person to face Finn Balor and he was the one to break Finn Balor's jaw in 2 places. But then Damian Priest came to make his own statement, but then Finn Balor just wasn't going to stand around waiting, and he made clear that he would defend his title at NXT New Year's Evil, which I still feel weird about as a title for the first NXT special of the new year after the year 2020 was, but whatever. But he said that he was going to let William Regal, the general manager, decide on who his challenger was going to be. But before he left, Scarlett Bordeaux came out to remind Finn Balor that Karrion Kross was coming back soon. But then Finn Balor was glad to accept that challenge whenever Karrion Kross was ready. But then Damian Priest taunted Scarlett and told him that he should just let her man pick his own battles, because she comes out, to sort of pick the battles. And he says, so it's just Karrion Kross just, waiting in the car, while you go out and do his business. So she kind of just looked at him and smiled, even though she looked a little bit irritated. And like I said, earlier, he wound up showing up and beating up on Damian Priest as he tried to, sort of force himself into the whole Johnny Gargano, thing. So he beat up on him, and now Karrion Kross has made his return, and everybody's on TikTok time. Not the app, but Karrion Kross time. He's a very scary man. Anyway, then we had a match between Isaiah Swerve Scott and Jake Atlas. And Jake Atlas is sort of looking to prove himself here as the next challenger for Santos Escobar's cruiserweight title. And Isaiah Swerve Scott sort of returned with more aggression in his attitude. So I guess now he's a heel. And so that aggression wound up not paying off, as he wound up being really frustrated as Jake Atlas kept kicking out of all of his, maneuvers. But this was a stellar match here between the two, and I'm kind of looking forward to both of them possibly fighting again. So Atlas caught him with a surprise pinning combination, and then Swerve stared at Jake Atlas as he walked out without shaking his former ally's hand. So it's kind of clear now that Swerve is getting tired of losing, and now he's turned into like this angry guy who has a chip on his shoulder. But Jake Atlas, isn't going to let that deter him from wanting to fight for the cruiserweight title going forward. I wish I could have fought longer, but you can't really pick that. Then we had a tag team match between the Grizzled Young Veterans, Imperium, and Everrise. So Everrise wanted to get some revenge against the two teams that attacked them recently. So Matt Martell and Chase Parker, it took them a minute to try to gain some control, but it didn't last that long. But then Fabian Eichner managed to save a near victory for Everrise on James Drake. And then Marcel Bartel got involved to almost give Imperium the win. But then Zach Gibson slipped in and set up Ticket to Mayhem on Parker for the victory. So the Grizzled Young Veterans, won. And it's good that they won because they actually they just came to NXT from UK. And they're just looking to prove themselves worthy to be NXT champions. So I'm pretty sure at some point they're going to be facing Oney Lorcan and Danny Burch. So I don't know what this is going to, set forth for them, but I'm pretty sure they're going to go for those titles at some point. I don't know when, but they will. Then they had a retrospective for War Games and showed, what happened in both of those matches. And Toni Storm and Io Shirai got to fighting afterward. And then they showed the clip where Io Shirai jumped from the top of the War Games cage, covered by a trash can, and that was probably the most gifable and greatest moment of the whole night to me. But basically everyone who was injured, including Dakota Kai, Candice LeRae, and Bobby Fish, talked about how they were seriously injured from their matches, but they're gloated over their team's wins. Then Io Shirai attacked Toni Storm during an interview, and then Ember Moon helped as well, as they laid them out, and then Io Shirai landed her signature moonsault on Toni Storm. So what it's looking like here is like you have two major contenders for the NXT Women's title here. You have Toni Storm, who has a new attitude like Patti LaBelle, and then you have Raquel Gonzalez, who pinned her at War Games. So I'm pretty sure they're both going to fight to see who's going to be the number one contender, or do a triple threat match to see, who's going to win that title. But either way, I'm here for it because the NXT Women's division is the best. So whatevs, give me what I want. Then we had a match between Tommaso Ciampa and Cameron Grimes. And I wasn't really that invested in this match because Cameron Grimes, of course, was out here acting like, he was arrogant and stuff, even though he totally just lost to Dexter Lumis here, but, at War Games. And I didn't understand why Tommaso Ciampa wanted to fight him, but I mean, this is just what's going to happen. So in a backstage promo, Ciampa said he went after Timothy Thatcher to make sure he still had it, and he was going after Cameron Grimes because he would not stop talking. So I guess that's as good as reason as any to fight someone, right? So Timothy Thatcher sat on the stage to watch Tommaso Ciampa. So I guess their feud isn't over. And then after a fist fight with Tommaso Ciampa went Ari, Cameron tricked Ciampa, taking advantage of his lingering injuries from the match that he had at War Games. And then Ciampa survived a few close calls and then began to fight back. But then after attempted interference was avoided, Tommaso Ciampa planted Cameron Grimes with the Willow's Bell for the victory. And then Timothy Thatcher stared down Tommaso Ciampa afterward, and then Grimes got in his face, and then he got knocked down. So the story between Ciampa and Timothy Thatcher clearly isn't over after they bruised and battered each other like in a definite barn burner match at War Games here. So they're going to fight each other again. So, hey, whatevs. Then we had Pete Dunne versus Killian Dane. So during an interview, Malcolm Bivens found Tyler Rust, and then he was walking away with him to talk about an opportunity. But then Killian Dane and Pete Dunne got into a fight backstage leading to this match. And Pete Dunne was brutalizing the crap out of Killian Dane here. And we hadn't really seen Killian Dane since he had his head slammed in a door by Pete Dunne and his, friends on Team Pat McAfee. So Killian Dane fought through this match with a German suplex, only for Pete Dunne to bounce back up and suplex his opponent. And they were going back and forth. Then Killian Dane kept fighting, but he was badly banged up. And each powerbomb and suplex just seemed to aggravate Pete Dunne. And then Pete Dunne wanted, this win as much as Killian Dane needed revenge for attacking him. And then Drake Maverick stopped Oney Lorcan and Danny Burch from interfering in the match, but then he got laid out. And then Killian Dane made the save. However, the distraction cost him the match, who walked into a big kick in the bitter end, and Pete Dunne wound up winning the match here. So this was a really good match for Killian Dane. It was probably the best one he's had in a long time. And I guess now this is just going to be their new feud, after they came out on the losing end of their feud with the Undisputed Era here. So this is going to be interesting. And also to talk about AEW a little bit, Kenny Omega showed up with old dude from Impact, and they were talking a whole lot of stuff to sort of continue their whole Impact thing that they had on Tuesday, where they were talking about the reasons why they were there and what they sought to do on Impact, which isn't entirely clear at the moment, to me anyway, but they were basically talking about how they're going to change, the face of wrestling and just throwing shots at everybody and all of that. And it's sort of still up in the air exactly what they're doing to sort of cross over with AEW and Impact here. But I guess they're sort of leaving it up to either interpretation or just leaving it as a wait and see method to try to get people to continue to watch. So yeah, and then also on AEW, Brandy Rose got in Shaq's face while Tony Schiavone had an interview with Shaq, and I guess Shaq basically disrespected her and Cody Rhodes, so she threw water at him and called him a disrespectful a-hole. And I'm living for this version of Brandy Rose that's just getting in people's faces. Like, I love it. So I don't know what's gonna be next for that. So then they also had Abaddon defeat someone in a match, and the AEW Women's Champion, Shida, came out there with a kendo stick and proceeded to beat her up, but then Abaddon wasn't staying down, and she did the iconic rise up on her knees, kind of like the Undertaker used to do, but except, he would be laid out, straight like he was in a casket, and then he would rise up. So AEW is turning out to be pretty interesting, and of course Sting made his appearance. But I'm not exactly sure what he said in his interview because I missed that because I was flipping back and forth between NXT and AEW there. So that's pretty much it on what happened with NXT and AEW. And now I'm going to recap Impact for the very first time on the Hardy Wrestling Podcast and talk about the end of SmackDown. Okay, so for the first time ever, I'm going to do a weekly recap on Impact Wrestling, which comes on Tuesdays on Access TV if you have that. This was really my first time watching Impact by myself. I knew about it, but never really watched it on my own before because I watched so much WWE content at the time. So it was just kind of like, okay, well, I'm going to watch this to see what's going to go on with this crossover thing with AEW and Kenny Omega showing up on this show. So something that I really did like was the tag team match they had for the Knockouts Tag Team title tournament between Taya Valkyrie and Rosemary versus Deonna Purrazzo and Kimber Lee. And I think that's funny because Miranda was just telling me about Taya Valkyrie in our interview, and it was just funny how this match just sort of manifested itself here. So I was really impressed with these girls. I remember Deonna Purrazzo from the Mae Young Classic and when she was on NXT for a while, and then she got released, and then it's so beautiful how she wound up, bouncing back and going to Impact and becoming the Knockout World Champion. Like, girl, like, that's amazing. So in this match, this was the quarterfinal round in the Tag Team Championship tournament. So Deonna Purrazzo looked to grab the Fujiwara armbar on the opening bell, but then Rosemary fended her off and then tagged Valkyrie into the match. And this is where I learned that Valkyrie is the longest reigning singles champion in Knockouts history. And I thought that was really cool. And then she found herself on the defensive as Purrazzo and Lee teed off on her. And then Valkyrie created separation and made the tag to Rosemary, who took the fight to Deonna Purrazzo. Then a sling blade and an exploder suplex allowed Rosemary to maintain control until Purrazzo downed her with a flatliner. But then as the action broke down and they were all fighting each other, it gave way to an errant kick from Purrazzo to Kimber Lee by accident. Then Rosemary took advantage and scored the pinfall victory to advance in the tournament. So now Rosemary and Valkyrie will have to face, I believe, Tasha Steelz and Kiera Hogan in the tournament. So I'm really interested to see that going forward. I was really interested in seeing their Knockouts division, so that was really cool. So that's really all that happened with the women on that show. Um, Something else that impressed me was seeing TJP versus Brian Myers, who was formerly Kurt Hawkins in WWE. And it was really cool to see TJP fight because I actually met him at a SmackDown, I believe maybe 2 years ago. And he was really nice, and he signed my Raw Women's title. And I always was a fan of his work during the Cruiserweight Classic, and then he went on to become like the first Cruiserweight champion in WWE's current iteration right now. So it was good to see him fight with Brian Myers here. And to see more of what Brian Myers could do in the ring was really impressive too. So TJP out-wrestled Brian Myers early, but then the former champion downed him with an elbow to the back of the head. And then Myers dodged him and then left TJP to crash and burn on the floor heading into the commercial break. And then after the commercial break, TJP fought his way back into the ring, leaving Myers reeling after a flurry of fast-paced offense like that cruiserweight stuff I was talking about. And then a missed Mamba splash allowed Brian Myers to recover and deliver a jumping flatliner for 2. Then Brian Myers set up for his lariat clothesline, but then TJP caught him in a knee bar for a near submission. Then TJP attempted a Mamba splash for the second time, only to catch the knees of Brian Myers in the midsection. Then he rolled him up for a near fall. Then TJP recovered and then applied the knee bar, only for his opponent to throw the referee into him, cheating. And then Brian Myers delivered the spine buster and followed with a clothesline for the win. So I got to see more of what Brian Myers can do in the ring in this match, and I was really excited for that. So that was really good, even though I hated that he cheated, but it's whatever. So then I found out that TJP is in a title hunt for the X Division title in a program, which is currently held by Raju. So that's going to be interesting to see. Then I was able to see this match between Cody Deaner and Eric Young. So Eric Young was Insanity in WWE, but they broke them up and they weren't really using him, so they let him go and he went back to Impact. So he wound up defeating Cody Deaner, who is someone I'm not really familiar with here, but he did a pretty good job in this match as well. So Cody Deaner was looking for revenge after, I guess, Eric Young assaulted him and attacked him as if he were meaningless, and he was trying to prove that he wasn't. So his cousin was out there, even though he didn't want him out there with him, but he just came out there anyway. Then Deaner fired off a flurry of offense, late in the match, and then appeared to be headed towards a monumental upset, but then a top rope splash. He tried to hit us top rope splash and he missed, and then Eric Young put him away with the pile driver. And then Young and Doring beat down the Deaners until Rhino hit the ring with a lead pipe, looking for a measure of revenge following a beating that he endured a few weeks back from Young and Joe Doring. So that was interesting. And then towards the end of the show, we had a tag team match between Chris Bay and Moose versus the Impact World Champion Rich Swann and Willie Mack. And I don't care what anybody says, I feel like Moose and Chris Bay are incredibly gorgeous black men. They're both gorgeous. They're really gorgeous. Chris Bay could be Bay. Anyway, so going forward, Rich Swann and Chris Bay are supposed to be fighting each other tonight, actually, at Final Resolution. So he teamed with Willie Mack to fight. So basically, Rich Swann teamed with Willie Mack to fight Bay and Moose in a blockbuster tag team match. So Bay tagged himself into the match, robbing Moose of a showdown with Rich Swann. They exchanged fast-paced, agile counter wrestling, and it was really impressive. And it was good to see Rich Swann again, because I actually met him too when he was a part of the Cruiserweight division in WWE, and he was really nice to me as well. So it was good to see more of his wrestling prowess here. And then back from the commercial break, Moose wore down Willie Mack and powerbombed his own partner onto the opponent. And then Bay worked over Mack, cutting him off from several attempts to tag his partner. And it worked for moments until a hot tag to Swann sparked a comeback for the babyface. Then Moose downed Rich Swann with a big powerbomb, and then the world champ took him down and then delivered a hurricanrana from the top rope that sent Bay crashing into Moose. Then Willie Mack missed a 6-star frog splash, leaving Bay and Swann to pair off again. Then Moose exploded back into the ring with a spear and then fired off elbows into the face of Willie Mack. Then Rich Swann fought him to the floor, and the resourceful Bay pinned the unconscious Mack to score the win and build momentum ahead of his world title opportunity here. So it was lots of black excellence all around here. And I thought it was funny that after Impact had gone off, someone had posted Wednesday that Rich Swann and Chris Bay would be the first two African American males to go after each other for a world title in a world title match since The Rock and Booker T in 2002 or 2003. And I thought that was really interesting and very telling of the wrestling landscape as a whole and how they have a tendency to treat African and African American male wrestlers. But here's hoping that this fact here and shedding light on this fact will actually open more opportunities for them to be able to do better, for promotions to do better by their black male and female superstars going forward. So after this, Rich Swann tried to go in the parking lot, but then he was stopped by security because the AEW champion Kenny Omega was in the parking lot in his bus. And it was almost like they were undermining him as a champion and as their world champion because the AEW champion was supposedly better than him. And it was interesting to see Rich Swann get frustrated about that. So I'm wondering if with this crossover, maybe Rich and Kenny will fight each other at some point with that type of aggression going forward. So Josh Matthews went out there to have a struggle interview with Don Callis and Kenny Omega here. And I say a struggle interview because one constructive criticism that I could say about Impact is the fact that Josh Matthews and I forgot the woman who he was commentating with. I forgot her name. I think it was Madison Rayne. They really don't have a good rhythm in terms of how they commentate. They're not as smooth, and I just feel like it was kind of a struggle to sort of listen to them in certain places because they kept pausing in the middle of a couple of sentences as well. And it was and repeating a lot of things. And it was just weird to try to listen to them or to get into them as a commentating team together. So maybe they'll find their rhythm a little bit later, but it was a little bit of a struggle. So Kenny Omega and Don Callis removed Jon Moxley's nameplate and replaced it with the Kenny Omega nameplate while this interview was going on. And so Don Callis was talking about how he hatched his plan when he was trained by Kenny's uncle, the Golden Sheik, and how he referred to himself as the invisible hand of pro wrestling. And he came back to not be the color commentator of New Japan Pro Wrestling, but he came back to change history with Kenny Omega. And he said that he changed the world when he booked Omega and Chris Jericho in the Tokyo Dome in 2017. And he took the credit, since he booked that match, he took the credit for creating All Elite Wrestling. And so Josh Matthews asked Kenny Omega about using the microphone. And then Omega attributed his actions to Moxley by putting his hands on his father figure, Callis. And he touted his place in the greatest matches of this generation and said that Impact should really treat him better. And then Josh Matthews asked him, well, why Impact? And then Omega fancied himself a collector, and the idea of Impact Gold appeals him, which basically feeds into the idea that maybe he'll be fighting Rich Swann for the title, and maybe he'll be a double champion. I don't know. And then he did his classic, I bid you adieu, goodbye, and good night, bang, and said that there was going to be a big announcement on AEW Dynamite. But mind you, I don't know what that announcement was because it was just kind of lost in translation. And they said that they would, keep it going, and they did the whole goodbye thing on AEW. So I don't know what's coming next, but maybe I'll watch it to see. Maybe I won't. I don't know if I'm going to continue. But the Impact show was pretty good in terms of their in-ring action. So I might just keep watching it going forward with that. And then I watched SmackDown towards the end because I had another interview on with Miranda Morales for her Miranda show with Greg DeMarco. And towards the end, I saw that Sasha Banks and Carmella fought each other for the SmackDown Women's title towards the end of the show. And it ended with Sasha Banks brawling on Carmella and getting frustrated with her trying to cheat with her sommelier. And then Carmella beat up on Sasha Banks outside of the ring and then threw a wine bottle at her and broke it, and then shook up another wine bottle to splash all over Sasha Banks. And she talked about how she was the untouchable one and how no one can touch her and all this other stuff. So that's really all of SmackDown that I saw. But I know really great things happened between Kevin Owens and Roman Reigns. I know Roman Reigns beat up on him and threatened his livelihood for his family. So yeah, and then I also saw in Talking Smack that Paul Heyman is looking forward to having Big E do bigger things, outside of the realm of the New Day, and him having Sami Zayn in his sights for the Intercontinental Championship, and him going forward as a possible world champion going forward in 2021. So that was good. And that's all for the recaps, and now I'm going to go to the conclusion. All right, so thank you for listening to part 2 of my new episode of the Hardy Wrestling Podcast. Like I always say, if you want to follow me, you can follow me on Instagram at Hardy Wrestling Podcast on Instagram, and on Twitter at Hardy Wrestle Pod. And if you ever have any questions about wrestling, you can just DM me or message me on either one of those platforms. And you can follow my Facebook page, which is called Hardy Wrestling with Stephanie Hardy, because it has the old title on there and haven't had a chance to really go in and change it. So you can follow me there as well. I'm still selling my t-shirts, my Chill Positive and Passionate t-shirts for $20. So if you want to buy that as a Christmas gift for someone, you can definitely do that. They come in the colors of black or white and go from size of small to extra large. But if you need a bigger size, you can still message me about that if you want it. And I take my payment via Cash App. So if you want a t-shirt, please more than likely, please support me and my t-shirts and stuff, and just support the show in general. But I thank you for listening to both of my episodes on today, and just thank you for supporting the ride. So until next time, I hope you're being safe and being as careful as you possibly can, and just enjoying, the holidays and what's left of this year. And until next time, bye y'all.